Welcome to Litigation Corner, where we break down legal topics in an easy-to-understand format. I'm John Martino, and I am the Director of Litigation for Community Legal Services, a no-cost legal aid firm covering 12 counties coast to coast in the middle of Florida. Today, we're doing a very special episode of Litigation Corner. I get a question all the time when I'm out in the community. What is legal aid? How is a legal aid firm different from any other law firm? We're different from other law firms in that our clients do not pay us for our time. We are supported by various grants and donations that allow us to help people in the community. Now, I could go through a laundry list of different services that we provide at Community Legal Services, but I think it's more fun to define legal aid by the great work that's being done across this country by organizations just like us. Let's kick things off with one of the most essential needs we all share: safe, stable housing. Because no one should have to choose between maintaining shelter and enforcing their rights. Thankfully, legal aid organizations across the country are stepping in where the system falls short, showing us all what it means to fight for fairness at home, literally. In Homestead, Florida, Janessa Lee thought that she had left her Section 8 housing situation behind. Until months later, out of the blue, she saw something odd on her credit report. A bill had been sent to collections, more than $2,000 for supposed damages and unpaid rent. The landlord sent these alleged debts to collections, even though Janessa Lee had the unit cleaned professionally and attempted to schedule a walkthrough that never happened. Worse yet, the notice of these debts had been mailed to her old address, so she didn't even know about the debt until it started impacting her credit. That's when she reached out to our friends to the south at Legal Services of Greater Miami, and their team immediately jumped into action. After firm correspondence and follow-up from the legal aid attorneys, the property manager eventually confirmed that these charges would be dropped and the collection removed. This story is a great reminder of why documentation, follow-through, and strong legal allies make all the difference. From South Florida to the foothills of North Carolina, legal aid is stepping in to defend the rights of tenants facing unstable and even dangerous housing conditions. In Charlotte, North Carolina, dozens of families living in a budget hotel were given just days to vacate their homes after the city announced plans to cut off utilities due to code violations. See, sometimes tenants have no choice but to stay in a place that is being neglected by the owner, and sometimes the government steps in, as was the case here. With nowhere to go and many residents unable to afford market rent, panic set in quickly. Enter Legal Aid of North Carolina, who showed up not only with legal knowledge but with compassion. Their attorneys helped delay the displacement, advocated for safer temporary accommodations, and ensured that vulnerable tenants had access to the housing and relocation resources they needed. For these families, the intervention of legal aid meant more than just stopping an eviction. It was a lifeline during a crisis. And sometimes the best defense a legal aid firm can provide is a good education. Across the country, legal aid isn't just stepping in after the fact. They're stepping up before the problems arise. In Easton, Pennsylvania, the team at North Penn Legal Services partnered with local officials to offer training programs for landlords and tenants alike, emphasizing the importance of knowing the law, building better relationships, and preventing disputes before they start. The training included topics like code enforcement, lease standards, and fair housing laws. In a region where landlord-tenant issues often go unreported until it's too late, these proactive efforts are helping to build trust and understanding across the board. Kudos to North Penn Legal Services for showing how proactive education can be just as impactful as courtroom victories. And finally, let's take a quick trip across the country. where one legal aid group wasn't afraid to stand up to not one, not two, but 6 landlords at once. After the Palisades wildfires in California, tenants found themselves reeling, not just from the flames, but from the spike in rent that followed. Several landlords saw the crisis as an opportunity, jacking up prices far beyond what was legal under emergency protections. In response, Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, along with a coalition of partner organizations, filed a major lawsuit against 6 of those landlords. The case sought injunctive relief and restitution for affected tenants who were targeted during their most vulnerable moments. Their bold litigation effort sent a message loud and clear. Disasters don't give landlords a free pass to exploit. Hats off to the tenacity of those organizations for holding the line when it mattered most. So whether it's cleaning up a credit report, stalling an unlawful eviction, or training landlords to play fair, Legal Aid is hard at work defending the foundation of our lives, our homes. Here at Community Legal Services, we have several units that help people with housing issues across Central Florida. Our housing unit helps tenants in both private and public housing spaces preserve their housing and enforce their rights. Our Fair Housing Unit ensures that no one is discriminated against in securing housing because of who they are or what they look like. Our Real Property Rights Protection Unit ensures that people who own property have clear title, free from outside claims, so we can ensure that family members who inherit the property can benefit from the full use of that property. And finally, our Housing Counseling Unit has HUD-certified housing counselors that can help people with questions related to refinancing, homestead, housing insurance, and more. Clearly, if you have questions related to your housing, you should reach out to Community Legal Services. But housing isn't the only area where legal aid helps, because legal aid is also fighting to relieve the financial burdens that weigh so many people down. Money troubles don't discriminate. Whether it's court fines, suspended licenses, or impossible debt collection notices, economic hardship has a way of stacking the deck against people just trying to make ends meet. Luckily, legal aid organizations across the country are helping folks flip the script. Let's take a closer look at how civil legal aid is breaking down financial barriers and giving people their footing back one case at a time. Imagine losing your driver's license, not for reckless driving, but because of unpaid court fines. That is the reality for thousands of people here in Florida, but it's also the case for thousands of people in Ohio, especially in low-income and rural communities. Without transportation, everyday life becomes a nightmare. No way to get to work, the grocery store, or even medical appointments. Thanks to the team at Ohio Legal Help, supported by Community Legal Aid in Akron and other regional partners, Ohio became one of the first states to roll out a comprehensive license reinstatement program. Legal aid attorneys helped individuals navigate the program, apply for debt reductions, and get their licenses back, legally and affordably. More than 246,000 people applied, and over 77,000 Ohioans had their fees waived entirely. A huge shout out to Ohio Legal Help and Community Legal Aid in Akron for paving the road to mobility. From second chances to helping people fight bad actors, let's head into our next segment, how legal aid organizations are taking on fraud, scams, and shady practices to protect consumers from falling through the cracks. From price gouging to scams targeting vulnerable folks, consumer protection is one of the most critical and overlooked fronts in civil legal aid. I'm reminded of this every day when working with the fierce consumer advocates at CLS. But thanks to the fierce advocacy of legal aid organizations across this country, justice has been showing up in mailboxes, courtrooms, and even credit reports. Let's take a closer look at how legal aid attorneys are helping people stand up to fraud and win. Let's travel to the Texas Gulf Coast, where a decades-long fight for environmental justice paid off in a historic way. Formosa Plastics, a major industrial polluter, had been discharging tiny plastic pellets, known as nurdles, into Lavaca Bay and surrounding waterways for years. But a group of citizen watchdogs, including a former shrimper named Diane, said enough was enough. Represented by Texas RioGrande Legal Aid, they filed a suit under the Clean Water Act. What happened next made legal history. After a lengthy litigation battle, a federal judge approved a landmark $50 million settlement, the largest ever awarded in a private Clean Water Act lawsuit. Even more importantly, the settlement required the company to adopt a zero discharge standard, ending the flow of plastics into the Texas waterways once and for all. Now, more than 5 years after this landmark victory, impact is still being felt. See, none of the money went to the plaintiffs themselves. Instead, every dollar is going into local environmental restoration projects, reviving marine life, restoring beaches, and supporting environmental education. From rebuilding Green Lake Park to funding youth marine camps and shrimping cooperatives, the ripple effects of this case will be felt for generations. Huge credit to Texas RioGrande Legal Aid for their legal firepower. And speaking of impacting lives, let's head to North Fort Myers, Florida, where we meet Callahan, a resilient widow whose story reminds us that scams don't just steal money, they steal peace of mind. After Hurricane Harvey devastated her home in 2017, Callahan, a senior living on limited means, faced an uphill battle. Trying to rebuild her life, she hired a roofing company to perform critical repairs. She paid them a $10,300 deposit, money she had painstakingly saved, but the company never completed the work. As delays piled up and promises fell flat, Callahan realized that she was being taken advantage of. But she didn't give up. She reached out to Florida Rural Legal Services. That organization stepped in and fought on her behalf, negotiating a partial refund from the roofing company. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about restoring dignity and showing that even in the wake of disaster, no one is alone when legal aid is on their side. A big thank you to Florida Rural Legal Services for their swift and compassionate response. Consumer protection also means safeguarding entire populations from exploitation, and that's exactly what's happening in Idaho, where Idaho Legal Aid Services is stepping up for seniors. In a recent report, elder financial exploitation was flagged as one of the most pressing issues in the state. Seniors, especially those living alone, have been targeted through phone scams, false charities, and deceptive home repair services. In response, Idaho Legal Aid Services launched an awareness campaign, legal clinics, and a hotline to help victims seek restitution and stop the cycle of abuse. Here's to Idaho Legal Aid for being a firewall between the seniors and scammers who think that they're easy prey. CLS also is here to help seniors, especially our older adults program, Disaster Legal Services Unit, and Consumer Unit. If you want to hear more about CLS helping seniors, take a look at episode 3 of Litigation Corner. Now let's take a breather here, because whether it's fraud, price gouging, or debt harassment, these stories show us something powerful. Access to justice is protection. It's a shield against bad actors and a tool to reclaim peace of mind. And thanks to the impressive work of legal aid attorneys across the country, more people are discovering that justice is within reach, one case at a time. Up next, we explore some of the game-changing ways legal aid teams are expanding access in innovative and tech-forward ways. While legal aid wins in the courtroom make headlines, there's another side of the story that deserves just as much applause: the incredible innovations helping close the justice gap, especially for folks in rural and underserved areas. Legal aid organizations across the country aren't just reacting to problems, they're reimagining access. Whether it's through creative technologies, strategic community partnerships, or empowering non-attorneys to help navigate the system, legal aid is showing us that sometimes the best way to move justice forward is to rethink how people get to the courthouse in the first place. Let's take a look. Picture this. You're in a small town, miles from the nearest legal aid office, and facing a court date with zero idea of where to begin. That's where legal kiosks come in. and they're changing everything. These kiosks offer everything from court form assistance to online legal aid applications. No long drives or law degrees required. Thanks to their work, folks who may have otherwise gone without any help are now finding support just down the road at their local library. And they're not the only ones. In Arkansas, legal aid providers have been installing kiosks statewide, bridging the rural divide with everything from custody forms to eviction help. And now let's talk about Arizona, where legal services programs are flipping the script in another big way. In a groundbreaking move, the Arizona Supreme Court launched a pilot program allowing trained non-lawyers, called licensed legal advocates, to provide limited legal services in civil matters. And legal aid organizations were on the front lines helping make it happen. The similarly named Community Legal Services out of Arizona, DNA People's Legal Services, and the Southern Arizona Legal Aid have worked closely with these legal advocates to expand reach in domestic violence, housing, and family law cases. The program is especially helpful in indigenous and low-income rural communities where traditional legal services are often out of reach. On top of that, programs like Community Justice Workers, staffed by trained community members, are connecting clients to vital legal aid resources faster and more effectively than ever before. Meanwhile, in Massachusetts, Community Legal Aid has launched a web-based module that helps folks navigate guardianship and caregiver responsibilities without needing to hire a lawyer. With user-friendly language, step-by-step guides, and accessibility features, this tool is making sure that people can care for their loved ones and understand their legal rights without being buried under paperwork. It's another stellar example of how innovation, when rooted in empathy and access, can transform lives. Innovation is not foreign to us here in Florida. As Floridians, we know that when storms come, so do legal challenges, whether it's filing a FEMA appeal, fighting predatory contractors, or securing housing rights. Recognizing this, Bay Area Legal Services created the Florida Disaster Legal Aid Helpline, a statewide lifeline offering free support. Launched in 2023, the helpline has assisted nearly 800 survivors of Hurricanes Debby, Helene, and Milton, assisting with issues from insurance denials to home repair fraud. My friend and colleague Jason Susala, managing attorney of Bay Area's disaster program, describes the vision. After boots on the ground, we need suits on the ground. That's exactly what Bay Area Legal Services has delivered: legal relief in real time when communities need it most. With just a phone call, Floridians now have access to legal guidance when they need it most. Big thanks to Bay Area Legal Services for making justice available and alerting legal aid programs across the state to survivors in our service area. In many parts of Florida, however, storms hit when no lawyers are nearby. That's why Legal Services of North Florida adopted a mobile model, sending attorneys and staff into hard-hit rural areas after hurricanes like Michael, Sally, and Helene hit. Their mobile legal units set up at FEMA centers and shelters, helping with FEMA appeals, landlord-tenant disputes, and contract fraud. Their on-the-ground efforts ensure that survivors aren't left in legal limbo. It's the kind of boots-on-the-ground approach that can mean the difference between going under or coming back stronger. Let's recognize Legal Services of North Florida for turning crisis into community care and for lending us their justice bus when we were helping survivors following Hurricane Ian in 2022. These programs have worked with CLS's own Disaster Legal Services unit to ensure that we all have the ability to help survivors in our respective areas. So, whether it's a kiosk in a library, a web tool that simplifies guardianship, a hotline that helps disaster survivors from falling through the cracks, or mobile legal teams showing up where no help was before, legal aid is proving that justice can be modern, accessible, and yes, even empowering. Stories like these remind us that behind every case is a person, a survivor navigating trauma, seeking safety, and reclaiming control. Legal aid can't erase the past, but it can help open the doors to a stronger, safer future. In coming weeks, we will be highlighting our work in the housing space, our work helping domestic violence survivors, and our work with veterans. A huge shout out to our staff and attorneys at Community Legal Services and all legal aid staff members across the country. Your passion and persistence reminding us that law can be a tool for healing, protection, and hope. In closing, we have traveled far and wide to discuss the good works being done. I'm hoping now that the next time someone asks you what legal aid is, you will tell them. Legal aid means hope. Legal aid stands for fairness and stands against injustice, and legal aid attorneys are doing that across this country, from coast to coast, and right here in our own neighborhoods. From disaster relief to domestic violence protection, legal aid organizations are fighting the good fight. They're not just filing motions and attending hearings, they're giving people a voice, a fair chance, a second shot. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Litigation Corner, where we highlighted stories that prove justice is alive, well, and working for those who need it most. Until next time, I'm John Martino. Stay informed, stay hopeful, and remember, legal aid matters.